Welcome to my designer class. My name is Mercy and I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. In today's class, I'm going to show this really beautiful festive card I designed, and I had some inspiration from my really good friend. She suggested that I stamp the Night of Navy silver onto it with the buffalo check background stamp, and it really, I thought, turned out beautifully. So I will show you how I made this card, and this is the Country Home set, which is the main stamp set that I used, and then of course the buffalo check. And here's some of my what I put into the card, so you can just take a look at that real quick, and I will get out my stamps. So I will start off by stamping the flowers, and I kind of felt like this looks like a flower arrangement for like a Thanksgiving table. I don't know, but that was sort of the look I was going for. So I will show you what I did here. I used Memento ink, and I just went ahead and stamped up the stamp really well. And these photopolymers are wonderful because you can really see, you know, how well you stamped it. So I just went over here, and this one isn't too critical, but just give it some oomph there. So there I have that. Oh, I forgot to add my cushioning, which is a good idea if you're using the photopolymer. All right, so the next thing I did was I created a mask, and very little actually did get covered, but this one key little, I guess it's a cotton, does get covered and get stamped on. And you can see I made a number of these cards, so you see where there was like it needed to be masked, which wasn't a whole lot. Now there's a little berry here, and I kind of used that as a reference. I wanted to go just under that one masked cotton right there. So excuse my head, but I really want to show you. This part is kind of critical, but I hope it came out okay. Yes. So if you don't get it perfectly straight here, it's really not going to matter too much when you're finished with the card. But you want to get it reasonably straight here. And then what I did was I fussy cut around the edge here. So the other really key element in this card was this beautiful background that I created. So I want to show you how I made that. It does use quite a bit of embossing powder, but I think it's well worth it. So I will set this part aside and get out my Stamparatus, which really helps with this process, which I'll show you. Okay, so here's my Stamparatus, and I went ahead and mounted it. Now there will be a little bit of an overlap, so I'm just gonna move this a little bit so that I can have some support here when I'm stamping. Anyhow, so having like a type sheet of paper, some scratch paper behind is important. I also created this little L-shaped thing here, and it will overlap a little bit too while you stamp. So I will go ahead and get my Night of Navy cardstock, and I will, okay, here's my embossing stuff. I did kind of get this ready as best I could. And of course, it's really important to use your embossing buddy. Now, one of the tricks I do here is I make this card 1 1/4 by 5 1/2, but in the end I will cut down 1/4 inch all around it. So if I make a goof mark when I'm trying to pick it up and emboss it, I have a little bit of wiggle room that way. So, all right, so here I have my Versamark, and important thing here is to really, I don't know if you can see this, really get a good layer here. And if you're doing multiple cards, actually the second and third and whatever, it seems to have a little better coverage, but this should do for demonstration purposes. And I just want to make sure it's all nice and shiny. You almost can't get too much Versamark on it. All right, so I'll be happy with that, hopefully. And I'm going to go ahead and cover my Versamark. and I will just stamp directly down. Now this is another important step, which is to really push hard and get a good coverage. You could go out and do it again, but it's better the first time if you just get it and then you don't have to mess with it. And there is a little bit of wiggle room with Vera Mark and using the powder, because if you don't get 100% coverage, usually if it's a solid part, it'll actually come out okay anyway. Okay, so I am pretty happy with that, although you can see here it didn't quite cover this corner and this corner. But in the end, I'm going to be cutting it off. I have to cut off somewhere, so it's not going to matter at all. All right, I'll set this aside, and next I'll start with the powder part. I have a piece of paper here folded in half, and the reason I do that is just so it's easier to recollect the embossing powder if you have a little bit, can form a corner. Now, it does use, again, a lot, like I mentioned. I'm getting kind of low on this because I was making a number of these, which I suppose is a good sign. I loved it so much, and I hope you will give this a try with this beautiful background stamp. I just hope this one carries over because I think it's just stunning, and it could be used pretty much all year. It could be a great summer card with the, with that plaid. Ooh. And it's absolutely stunning with this particular stamp set, the Country Home. So again, this part is a little bit tedious. You just have to try to get all the areas really nice and covered. And I think there's one little spot there I'm not too happy about. Let's see what I can do. Let's get that little part. Yeah, so it's a bit of a booger here. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't get a good coverage there with the Vera Mark, but some of this will be covered in the end, and I will just position it so that it would be covered up fully. All right, so I'm gonna start heating my gun up, and while I'm doing that, I am going to kind of get rid of some of this powder that went a little bit not where it should have, and clean it up just a teeny bit. All right, so the next thing that I really highly recommend is using a pair of tweezers. And I would just, get in a spot where it's blank anyway. And then I would just go ahead. So, and this is just stunning once it comes up. Yeah, it's starting to come up. Okay, good. But it does take a little while, so I apologize for all the racket and noise. If you do make a bunch of these, you can do the heat setting in kind of batches. So just something to keep in mind that you, once the powder is on in the Vera Mark, you have some time. Just a little tip that way. Okay, just want to bring it up. Maybe I could show this a little better so it's a little bit more interesting instead of straight down. But again, this is just so stunning, and it really is a beautiful holiday card it makes. I think it would be a wonderful background for Christmas as well. Maybe I would try a different setup, try red in the silver, but this is stunning too for Christmas. I love actually using sort of semi-non-traditional Christmas colors like blue and purple. It's just beautiful too. Okay, so there we go. It's maybe not quite as perfect as I would like, but again, some of it will be covered. So if you get a little spot like that, and then you do trim it up. So, all right, I just thought I would show how that works, and I will set that aside and start assembling the card. I will go ahead. I did have one already prepared here, and now my paper's a little warped from that heat gun. Oh, it's always something, right? It is always something. Okay, so here are the elements. I went ahead and colored this, and I just think it's just gorgeous. This card is kind of simple, but kind of really complicated looking in a sense, but it's not that hard to make. So that's my favorite, when it looks almost complicated, but it actually isn't. As far as stamping the sentiment, I will go ahead bring my thing here. What is this thing called? The thing. All right. It gives some cushioning, so that's the main idea. With the photopolymer, you definitely want some. So this, I'm using Sahara sand, and for the stamp, I'm using this beautiful sentiment, simply thankful for all the good things. So again, I think this would make an ideal like Thanksgiving time card, or around that time. It could be a thank you card too. Or I don't know, just thinking of someone during the holidays or the start of the holidays. So anyhow, I just like to tap really well. And for this one, I did just kind of center. Sorry if you see my head, but I really like to get things perfect. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Don't tell anyone that. No one would ever guess, I'm sure. All right, so that one turned out pretty well. But if you do mess up, you could flip it over and try again, which don't tell anyone. On my other card, I did do that. So second chances are always wonderful. All right, so for the cherry cobbler, here are my dimensions there. It's just a 1/4 inch around bigger. Well, it would be 1/8 of an inch actually when it's all said and done, but you get the picture, the idea anyhow. All right, so I'll go ahead and bring my card back in, and I use this beautiful pearlized doily. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off, and I did set this down first on the card just so that I had enough room for it. Now, I actually have this tear tape on the top, and the reason why I did that is because I'm actually going to use it sort of as a guide, and boy, it didn't quite work the way I was hoping here. So I will put it back and hope the second time, yes, was where it turned out better. So again, push down really hard. Sometimes with when you're embossing and all these textures, it definitely doesn't want to, and I'm having the same issues again with this one. Yikes, with this tear tape wants to, it tends to want to just stick to things. So, okay. That was harder than it should have been, but we do what we got to do. Regular paper just comes off a little better. So, pardon my arm here. I will then kind of set this down to where I want, but I'm not going to really press too hard because up here, I need to slide this down in. So I will go ahead quickly take off this tear tape that I put on. It's always something. And get this card complete in no time at all. I just love this set, this country home set. There's so many things. You can make beautiful autumn cards, and just even holidays, this card demonstrates. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. So down she goes. And here, I did use dimensionals, so I'll bring in, oh, those aren't the ones I was going to use. Oh, I guess I am. These are some non-Stampin' Up ones that I had, and I'm trying to use up, so I guess that's what's going to happen today. All right, so here we go. I just did about 3 here. Well, I'll just add a little bit, one more here. So dimensionals just add a little pop there, and of course always super easy to use. So I thought this card needed one more thing, and which is how I came up with the bow. Just when I'm trying to make this really straight. Okay, all right, so for this bow, I wrapped it 3 times around 2 fingers, and then I got a string and just tied it. So it's kind of a faux bow, which works for me in a sense. So I'm gonna grab my glue dots here. And the easiest way to put a bow like this on is using a glue dot. So here we go, 1, 2, 3, right? And we have it adhered. Now it does kind of show a tiny bit, so you can kind of curl it a little bit. All right, so I do want it to show, but I kind of want it can be covered slightly, the wording. All right, so Anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed this video and will consider subscribing and giving me a thumbs up. Don't forget to tap the bell for notifications. If there are any products you would like to order, please email me at mewants3@gmail.com. And again, I hope you have a wonderful day and happy stamping.